So sustainable technology is a problem. So to gain normalcy in education, online learning got scaled up with the pandemic. So online learning is learning through internet, as synchronous, asynchronous, and instructors did lessons at the convenience of their timetable, as well as the students could access this information, and it went on and going on still to create a sense of normalcy during the past 1.5 to 2 years. So, I mean, students started to spend time productively, but in this online became a household term. Always people, talk about online. So that was something, but the equity issues. So the challenges started. Equity in online teaching and learning, popular schools, big schools, catering the higher strata of the society. They could manage the online teaching and learning, but the disparities which were already existing. Already there were disparities, not only in Sri Lanka, even in India and in South, even in other countries. The disparities in education existed, and they became more and more exacerbated. They became increasingly, visible. So there were many frustrations of both sides. The parents who were receiving, the parents, the students, and people who delivered this, but the state intervention in terms of Sri Lanka, but I have heard certain colleagues of mine talking about certain interventions in India, maybe in some parts of India. So Sri Lanka is a small country, and the state intervention was not adequate. So with this interactive learning and learning losses, even students experienced uncertainty about the way forward, and stress symptoms came up, negative emotionality, and these burnout cases of teachers and students are becoming very high. And so inequalities of learning and teaching online, because parents were not prepared to have the children at home and give them the facilities to learn, and the technological facilities, and the families who having several children, and they did not know what to do. And university sessions, even our undergraduates coming from the rural places, we could not deliver the lectures on various occasions because they were talking very much of difficulties. And some parents also worked online, and then the demand for online work was reaching more and more. You take one single household, the costs and devices, it is difficult to gauge. So with all these little things, we have to talk about the digital divide becoming visible with the pandemic. Not that it was not existing. It became the large-scale gap between these demographies, regions, to access modern information and communication technologies, and in South Asia, in Sri Lanka. I mean, we had just started empowering ourselves with the various tech investment, bringing this digital divide into some kind of small gap, but we were not there prepared for the pandemic, and then connectivity issues, high data counts, and all these things. And the people who were not having much literacy and had problems of addressing this digital divide. So outcome was many children in low-income countries did not participate. So one of the challenges of the sustainable technology is the inadequate EdTech investments leading to highlighted inequalities in digital access. So it's digital infrastructure, the human infrastructure, and the logistical and administrative systems, deploying the main tech architectures. a challenge. Inadequate educational technological investment. So we were not prepared. Some of the countries in South Asia were not prepared, and sustainability could not be attained at all because the priorities, the technology is so much, on another level that companies need, workplaces need, and education need technologies, so these infrastructures and trained people, and these administrative systems where these supplies of data and facilities became very, very problematic. So this is one of the, media photographs where they have collected children seeking connectivity in Sri Lanka. They are on top of hills, and on top of trees. Some of them with their parents. They have taken their, telephones with mobile gadgets and modems and stuff, mobile modems, and then they're with the masks, and these are some of the scenarios that we encounter in Sri Lanka. And attending these online classes in their homes, so these children are there, in the gardens, looking for a good place to, find a good signal. And, the minute photographs are of a preschool child trying to sort of do some activities as they're looking at the screen, and also doing some physical activities. These were, going on, and still some of these things are going on in a big way. And these psychological ramifications of moving out of familiar structured learning groups is a problem for learners. So school classroom provided the structure and an environment for effective learning. Where the home is not so. So the effectiveness of this remote learning varies amongst age groups. So older children are more focused and they are prepared to do this. But small children, it's very difficult to get them motivated and to make them wait until their teacher talks to them. The teacher has to rotate gently, taking 5 or 6 children, one by one, and taking the activity online. So these remote learning, psychological implications of such is kind of difficult to gauge. And the teachers' skills and confidence of their skills, attitudes, experiences towards technology. So the sustainability of the technology is dependent on the patient. So how much skillful are they? How much positively motivated? And for these novel technologies, and are they versatile, or are they into some kind of training? They are not actually. So exciting technologies are already used outside the education system and the educational context. But in the educational context, these were very slow to be getting into, because of the investments and time in learning and problems of adaptability. So therefore, one of the key challenges that I highlight of these problems of sustainability is e-readiness and techno-anxiety. So in terms of both students and teachers, because the teacher preparation for online teaching was not happening before the pandemic, not in a big way at least. So they are usually trained, so therefore lack of continuous updates on ICT knowledge and skills led to techno-anxiety. So they are anxious about using technology because our teachers are used to, talking in front of class, with a lot of students looking at them. So this unpleasant psychological activation and discomfort due to this ICT use for the future is a problem that we need to address. So the other thing is that the learning spaces to enable sustainable technology to function for education. So we can't just have the technology just any place, you have to have some kind of an infrastructure, a learning space where you can establish yourself. So therefore, the computers, how they are placed, and whether this kind of a computer laboratory is good enough for the normal activity-based classroom. And it's very difficult to understand the implications of these learning spaces because a teacher with a large number of students in a classroom, once they are in a laboratory, only half the class is there, and then you can move the chairs, and then it's a problem. So I've taken some photographs to make yourself with less bored. I mean, these two photographs are coming from three from China, one from Sri Lanka, and this one is our University of Colombo smart classroom, right? I mean, this is the largest smart classroom in the University of Colombo, and so it took a long time to get one established, and then very recently it was opened, but now the students are not there. And look at this classroom where the furniture is movable and the smart booths and things are there. So this is more of a good place to work in activity-based learning as we used to do in classes, in normal classrooms. And this is also something like ours. This is from China, and this is also from a school in China. And then this is also a traditional classroom in China, but then students are, taking tablets, using personalized, tools while it is teaching. And so all this can happen in some way or the other with the people who have the technology, but the problems of assessment, assessment culture, we are still unable to get rich with the technology. Because one reason is the lack of sustainable technology. Because now we have exams online. Exams online, and how do we know what students are doing? Whether the students are looking at the notebooks and writing the answers. So they have to keep the cameras on. But I mean, more than 3/4 of our students, undergraduates, mind you, undergraduates, they can't switch their cameras. The signal is so slow, therefore they can't keep it like that. So we have to let go of it. So we don't know what to do. So we go on, imposing rules and regulations and no sustainable technology. So the exams, but once they are done, you find issues of handwriting, we are into inquiries, mind you, a lot of hassle, although many tools are available. In technology for, at least for formative assessment, not for final assessment. It is very hard. One other thing is that the challenge of keeping up with the changes in the technological development changing, and it's hard. Now, these two photographs are from Japan. Now, see the technology. I mean, they have all kinds of technology because Japan, they have all these children have their technological tools. But see, the master is working on the voting board, very heavily written things. And I was fascinated, they have easily done with everything on internet, but they were not interested. They were all these tablets and stuff are somewhere stored here. And even the small children, this is also technology. So all these, even the use of that Blackboard is a technology. You don't have to use the online kind of thing all the time. I'm sure you are not implying technology as such. We are all in the same area. These people are in very advanced stages in technology, like two people, not like Sri Lankans. So this is also technology-based learning, and this fatigue into experience by video calls, video chats. The cognitive load is much higher because you have to sit here. in a class you can move around, but you have to square into this Zoom, and this Zoom fatigue is also a big problem in the world to teachers, especially because teacher has to be here. Learner must be running around, but the teacher will have to be there for online lessons and deliver the lecture or the session in a systematic manner. And there are lots of issues of increased harm, digital distractions, gaming, and unsuitable games, and many children, several children, I would say, committed suicide due to this, technology, unwanted kind of gaming, and even people whom I knew, one of my students' child also committed suicide, hung himself because of getting into online work, and then slowly deviating from there, and then getting into this harmful self-harm attitudes. So they're sending images and all these things, sexual images, exchanges, harassments, everyday media of those things. Very sad. So, what are the critiques of technology-based education? Can learning through technology go to person? That is also something that we are working, we have to think about. There are pros and cons. Some say individualized learning, good personality formation, some say can't. So, we have to think about those things. So, one of the recommendations to bridge the digital inequalities and bridge the relationships between educators and ICT technologies. I think that should be done. We are trying to do it in Sri Lanka. So these ITK people and us, the people like me, they are part of us. So therefore we have to put together, we have to recruit people, we have to commission people, and then we have to educate each other. And we have to ensure the continued access to education through technology. Can we do that? So can we provide all these equipment and stuff to bridge the digital divide? Can we address the technological anxiety? Can we train the teachers? It's another problem. So therefore, we have to see, there's an energy crisis. We are facing energy crisis across the world, and therefore we have to address that as well. So electricity is also dial-up. We have to be very, very, very careful about it. So finally, what I say would be to, there are complex factors, a lot of factors, intricately woven together, and we have to exercise some kind of, sharing of knowledge and work through each and every context, and then see the issues of the context, and then see what we can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam, for recognizing that science and technology education must do more than simply pay lip service to sustainable development and must focus learning on issues of relevances facing society. Also, the education context must provide the frame for learning. Thank you, madam, for your well-needed words. Our next notable speaker, Professor J.K. Billu, Worcester University, UK. She joined the university as a professor of education, having previously worked in a range of teaching, research and leadership roles in further and higher education.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm going to be keeping my camera off because we have some issues with, we have a storm going on in England at the moment, and so it's going to be a little bit difficult with internet, so I hope that you will bear with me. I've already sent my presentation slides over. I hope you can see them. And I shall be using our sort of speak, and I hope we will carry on and move the slides on. So this afternoon, it's morning here in the UK, but it's obviously afternoon there in India. And I'm just going to share some thoughts about what we understand by envisioning future classrooms. So in my presentation, I want us to think about what we mean by classrooms, both in a physical sense, but also in an emotional and social sense as well, because classrooms are not just physical spaces, but they're also social and emotional spaces for education. And I think particularly over the last 2 years, we perhaps have also realised how much social and emotional interaction and its importance, particularly when we've all been online, as a previous speaker also said. So I want us to think about not just the physical architecture of classrooms, but also the emotional and social architecture of classrooms. And the presentation will include my understanding of what I want to see envision classrooms to be, rather than giving us models. So I think classrooms in the future will be diverse, and there'll be configurations of a combination of online and face-to-face interactions. I think also we need to think about them being much more participatory, learner-centered if we like. And for example, I'm using the example of PBL, or problem-based learning, as a pedagogy which is much more participative than the transmission models of education that perhaps we've been used to in the past. I also want us to think about concepts, disciplines, so transdisciplinary threshold concepts, and I'll give a definition of that in my presentation later on. To think about, I'm not highly skilled in the use of educational technology. I'm sure there are many people who are much more skilled, and it's very, very important for us to think about how we as educators, teachers, work with technology specialists in the new development of, for example, virtual worlds. I think as teachers, as professors, as teaching assistants, we all use some forms of technology, and we always have. But there are many more people, particularly in the private sector, who are much more skilled at the use of technology, and we need to be thinking about how we can collaborate with them to make the best use of technology for learning. Next slide, please. So I'm going to, I've brought along a few pictures for us to think about classrooms. So I guess in the past, classrooms were very much teacher-centered. Pedagogy was very much focused on the wisdom of the teacher. The teacher was seen as a font of all knowledge, and pupils, and in this case, this is obviously schools, but equally applies to higher education, where teachers were seen as the givers of knowledge, and perhaps students were seen as empty buckets, which we fill with knowledge, with whatever sector of education we worked in. In more recent years, we've started to think about trying to use the experience of learners in how we teach and how they learn, particularly in all sectors of education, but particularly in higher education and perhaps in adult education. So I guess we need to think about how much of the configuration, the architecture of our classrooms, both emotionally, socially and physically, still resembles the past classrooms that we see in that slide, Next slide, please. Starting to think a little bit more about how contemporary classrooms look, perhaps. So the three examples there are from different countries. You may be able to guess which countries they're from. But in one of them, you see the classroom physical layout is very much in tables that can be moved around, and the teacher can circulate freely amongst the students, much more so than in the rooms that we used to have. In another one, you can see very much the teacher still seen as the central figure in teaching in schools, and the use of older technologies such as blackboards or we sometimes now call them whiteboards because they are no longer the chalkboards that we used in the past. And then the other picture there is of a very rural place with fewer facilities than the other two. So that one is an African one. The other one is maybe an Indian classroom. I've taken them off the internet, so I'm not sure which countries they are. And the top one is a European one. So you can see the difference between countries in terms of resources, level of resources, but also in terms of thinking about pedagogy and how they think about learning and classrooms. Next slide, please. So more recently, of course, we are used to seeing contemporary classrooms in a technology format. Probably most people using things like Zoom or Teams to do their teaching and learning through. And of course, it has a very, very different kind of feel, although we've all got better, perhaps, at using technology and making use of it. Next slide, please. This one, so during COVID-19, again, the previous speaker mentioned this as well, we've now become fatigued, really, with Zoom. Although it has a lot of potential in that we can still see people. So it's brought the COVID-19 pandemic has brought video conferencing to our desks much more readily, but this technology is perhaps a little bit disruptive in that it's changing our working practices as educators and as teachers and as learners. And although we have the technical capability now to work a lot more online, a recent study of school leaders in the UK found that so head teachers in different schools in the 4 countries of the UK found that the key thing from research was that people, that was the article's title, because although they had all moved, as every other country in the world had, to online teaching during the pandemic, actually school leaders were now finding it very, very challenging to actually engage with teachers and with learners in order to make people feel confident about mixing with people, being with people face to face. So that's a different challenge for us as educators and as teachers and as learners, is that we are much more reticent, perhaps, much less willing to meet people face to face and prefer the security of sitting behind a screen, I guess, because we can be a bit more anonymous behind a screen, and perhaps we feel more exposed when we're actually physically in a classroom, whatever sector of education it is. So, next slide, please. So, what can we envisage for future learning and for future classrooms? So in the next part of my presentation, I'm going to consider 3 ideas to provoke thinking about future curricula and the design or ideal spaces for learning. So one of the things, as I mentioned before, is PBL as an example of a participatory pedagogy, threshold concepts as an idea of moving beyond subject boundaries in teaching and learning, and new digital developments. So the examples in this part of the presentation are from higher education, but I think they're applicable in other sectors of education as well. So next slide, please. So So PBL, some of you may be familiar with the term, others may not be so familiar, but PBL or PBL in virtual worlds has become a form of pedagogy that's used in different sectors of higher education in the UK. In fact, one of my PhD students has just completed her PhD on the use of PBL in different disciplines in different UK universities. So it's quite interesting what she's found out, and if there's time, we may be able to share that at some point. But what is problem-based learning? It's defined as students working in teams of 4 to 6 on a series of problem scenarios that combine to make up a module, unit, or which may form a program. And it's quite popular in the health sciences and in medicine, but it's also being used in education as well. So could you click to get the next part? Yeah, thank you. So virtual worlds are three-dimensional graphical online environment. Learning through the use of technology such as virtual worlds has expanded rapidly in higher education in recent years. So this is in the UK, but in other European countries as well. I'm not too sure about the situation in India, but it's certainly worth considering integrating this into some of the curricula that are being taught in higher education in different countries. Next slide, please. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to refer to a slightly bigger version of this on my presentation. So practice of pedagogies. Can be divided up into what we call constellations of learning. And at the University of Worcester, I have the privilege of working with Professor Maggie Savin-Baden, who's an expert in problem-based learning. And she has developed the above, this conceptualization that I'm presenting of different forms of PBL. And she and I have been supervising this PhD student which has completed her PhD on the use of problem-based learning in different disciplines across different universities in the UK. So obviously you will have access to this presentation, so we can look at it in a little bit more detail. But it's quite interesting that Maggie has categorized problem-based learning into 9 constellations, what she's called 9 constellations. She quite likes to use lots of different metaphors and images in her research. And again, I can refer you to some of her written work if anyone is particularly interested in this idea. And it goes from where problem-based learning on the left-hand side is really about managing knowledge, through to problem-based learning, which is focuses on activity, to project-led problem-based learning, to problem-based learning for practical capabilities, to it being based for design-based learning, multimodal learning, distributed learning, and to the sort of most pure, if you like, form of problem-based learning, transformation, the social reform. So it categorizes problem-based learning into its different forms, into, if you like, different levels of the nature of the problem. So again, these can be divided into the type of the problem, the level of interaction, the form of facilitation, and the focus for assessment. So on the left-hand side, the focus of assessment is the testing of knowledge, which leads into much more of the way we think about teaching learning, perhaps. On the right-hand side, it moves to flexible and student-led learning. So this is how it's much more participatory in that students have a big role in driving their learning. And this is because they're posed with problems that they need to solve, rather than the teacher giving lectures in the way that, not to say that lectures are not necessary, but that the learning is delivered in a very different kind of way. So as you may well appreciate, that the best learner-centered classrooms are where the teachers seem to be doing nothing, because all the preparation has gone into the way that the activities have been designed, and the students take the main role in driving the learning and individualising the learning to their own needs. So that's an example of participatory pedagogy, which have different variations and different levels of types of problem, the type of interaction, the type of facilitation, and the focus of the assessment. So I'm going to leave that as a thought and move on into the next slide, please. So a definition of what we mean by participatory pedagogies as problem-based learning is one example. They're forms of learning and teaching that harness the use of digital media and participatory cultures and action. And again, if you could click to get the next part on this line, please. In practice, these pedagogies are often hidden, enmeshed, and transcend disciplines, structures, and learning boundaries. So the whole thinking behind participatory pedagogies is that we move beyond boundaries and try to get our learners to think in a different way and prepare them for a world where things are not known, where uncertainty is constant, rather than knowledge is what we told them, and then we give them an examination and we test them on it and they get 99% and they're at the top of the class. But that may not be the kinds of things that are going to prepare them for the world of work. So participatory pedagogies and problem-based learning are really part of a movement where employers are saying that we need graduates that can deal with uncertainty, that can come up with innovative ideas, that can be creative. We don't need graduates who learn what our teacher has told them and bring that to us. And then, and then another idea then. Next slide, please. Seem to have frozen. So that's participatory pedagogies, and another idea associated with these new ways of thinking about teaching, learning, classrooms is the idea of threshold concepts. Threshold concepts, then, an idea which has been put forward by two researchers, Mayer and Land. And the idea's been around for a little while, so this work was done in 2003. But it hasn't become mainstream part of higher education or of education in itself. But they argued for the notion of a threshold concept. So we're probably all familiar with concepts in education here, what is a concept. But the idea of a threshold concept is the idea that it opens up a new way of thinking about something that was previously inaccessible. So it's the idea of a portal about looking through a new type of lens so that you're not bound by your subject. So if I'm a physicist, which I'm not, I will be looking at the world through my lens of physical science. If I am an English specialist, I may be looking at the world through my lens of literature, of metaphor, of imagery. Threshold concepts are things which transcend those disciplinary boundaries and those physical boundaries, if you like. So I want us to open up to a different way of thinking and to a new way of thinking. And next slide, please. So they have identified some of the characteristics of threshold concepts. And the five, they are things that are, threshold concepts are transformative. They result in a shift in the perception of a subject or a set of ideas. They're irreversible. Thus, once you have looked at the world in a different way, you may reject the idea, but you don't return to the same idea. You develop it into a different kind of idea. They're integrative. They illustrate how ideas of knowledge are linked together but were formerly not apparent. So you're coming up with new ways of linking up different concepts that actually you're familiar with. They're bounded, so the space between the frontiers and the threshold concept has been entered. So you're looking at the world in a different kind of way. And the other thing about them, which may be why they haven't become so mainstream in education, is that they are troublesome. They're difficult to teach. There's something that we may feel is not so coherent for students to grasp, because they are looking at the world in a critical way, in a different way, in a way that we haven't established as being, an established form of knowledge. Next slide, please. So from moving on to about thinking about the threshold concepts, they moved on to talk about transdisciplinary threshold concepts, which are defined as things that transcend disciplines and subject boundaries. As I understood, the student experience is transformed as a way of thinking about the world and the way that they progress through the curriculum. So it is this idea of stretching students to think about in a broader way than through their particular subject-bound lens. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the third idea that I just want to share with you quickly is the idea. Could we go back slightly? Yeah. To talk about new digital developments. So the three things here are virtual worlds, problem-based simulations, and chatbots. So next slide, thank you. So chatbots are things that are now appearing. And again, maybe using I've used two examples from Learning and Courage, where for the day for learning Courage on it rather than necessarily during the day in the schedule. I've got a couple of examples in English, and as you can see, I'm here to practice your English. I'm here whenever you want me. I'm a robot, so I never sleep. So teachers and educators are challenged with these new ways of learning, and learners are coming with these skills, which communicators need to. Another example. Next slide. So another example of chatbots for language learning, again, so different languages here. So it may be that for some forms of learning, technologies that are available all the time for learners are better than a teacher in a physical classroom, timetabled on a particular day to teach a particular lesson. So we need to be flexible as educators and as teachers to be able to harness what is around and what is a better, an easier way for people to learn things than we can teach in a formal classroom. So the final bit of my slides, next slide please, are pedagogical agents. So pedagogical agents is a form of software which can provide a human-like interaction using natural language interface. So these may be familiar from smartphone interfaces such as Siri, Cortina, or other virtual assistants which are found on websites such as Anna, which is a website for a major international company. So they are able to produce on the computer screen lifelike behaviours such as speech, emotions, gestures, and movements. So these are things that are available, that are coming, and it may be, again, as designers of curricula and designers of learning spaces, we need to be thinking about how we can use them. Next slide, please. So, as well as the pedagogical agents are software application, natural language, and lifelike behaviours, which I just mentioned. Next slide, please. really. I just wanted to make us think about really that classrooms are not just physical spaces, but are also social and emotional spaces for education. And so the design and use of spaces is often driven by administrators, particularly in higher education in the UK at the moment, but I'm sure in other spheres as well, rather than the needs of the pedagogical approach. And as I said, our PhD student found that many higher education institutions still have the tiered lecture theatres, but we're expecting problem-based learning to be able to be effectively taught within those kinds of spaces, which it can't be because for some very learner-centred participatory pedagogies, you need to be able to move the furniture around, you need to be able to bring in technology, you need to be able to create social and emotional spaces as well as physical spaces for learning. So finally, just to summarise, I suggest that future classrooms, when we're thinking about envisaging future classrooms, that we start to think about making the learning spaces flexible, including diverse configurations of online and face-to-face interaction with peers and tutors. They should be designed to maximise participatory pedagogies, for example, pedagogies like problem-based learning, PBL. We should try to develop transdisciplinary threshold concepts so our learners are able to move around, because we're finding, particularly in UK higher education and elsewhere, that graduates don't stay in the same jobs for life as they used to. They have to reskill, they have to reorientate their careers. So the idea of transdisciplinary concepts is that they can take these to different situations. So when they change career, these are things that stay with them. We should maximise the potential of new digital developments in the virtual world, and we should start to think about if we are in influential positions in education, to encourage innovative pedagogy rather than drive pedagogy by administrative convenience, because we have things to be delivered in a particular way and timetable it in that way. But I think it's thinking about envisioning for the future. It is about being flexible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, madam, for exploring the potential impact of smart material, augmented reality, and artificial intelligence in teaching and learning. I thank you again for your informative words.
Thank you.
Now, we will be having passing memorial lecture, which is organized in the memory of Professor D.K. Pasi, and I request Professor S.P. Malhotra to hold this session.
Thank you very much. Friends, just to tell you, one of the major features of our conference always has been the passing memorial lecture. This is not a lecture in that this is neither just to remember passing, it is just in a way to tell all the persons who are participating in the conference that the theory of thinking of Professor Pasi, and in order to mold ourselves, if we can adopt or if we can take upon the policy as well as the thinking of Professor Pasi. So one of the features of our conference is always Professor Pasi memorial lecture. So this time, friends, we have requested Professor Akhilesh Singh to deliver the Pasi memorial lecture. Just to tell you, friends, Professor Akhilesh Singh is Vice Chancellor of Professor Rajendra Singh University, Prayagraj. It is a state university also called as Mujibhai University, Prayagraj. Just to tell you about, if I just want to introduce Professor Akhilesh Singh, I will tell you, it is a story of a rising person or I should say story of a school boy who got education through the village and worked very hard to reach this position. Now he is the vice chancellor of the university, which has more than 375 affiliated colleges. And so I just wanted to tell you, a person from Bangla district of a Daguni village, and now he has risen to this position, I will say congrats to him also. Just to tell you that he has rich experience of 20 years in the university in the different positions. He has contributed substantially in the field of media. Just to again emphasize that he is a media person. He has worked in the EMR2 of Indore Institute, that is the Indian Institute, as a professor. And just to tell that he has been bestowed with several honors and awards, such as MP Young Scientist Award, UGCCC National and International Awards. So all these awards have been given, so we are lucky that we have him there. So welcome Professor Khalid Singh. Just to tell you guys that another thing I would like to add is that he has been a student of late Professor P.K. Passi when he was a student of Daniel University. Professor Passi always rated him a very serious and hard-working student. So we welcome him to this international conference and we request him for the Passi Memorial event. So, Professor Khalid Singh, all to you.
Thank you, sir. Namaskar. Hello, everyone. I'm privileged, honored, and delighted to deliver Passi Memorial Lecture in this GERA conference, which is being organized by a Universal Group of Institutions and KMUTT Bangkok. As Mr. Malhotra has already said, that I have been closely associated with Professor B.K. Passi for more than 35 years. As a student, and always I have been his student, as his colleague also. Professor Passi, as you all know, was a visionary and an institution builder. He was an ardent lover of teaching and research, truly a great teacher, educator. But what I would say, a great learner. Why I'm saying a great learner? Because, always, whenever, I met him or I used to meet him, he would ask me, Guruji, aaj kuch naya sikha do. So always, trying to learn, every day trying to learn something new. Right? So, and he also, taught me that if you want to be a good learner or a great learner, then you have to be a great listener. So he was always emphasizing on this skill, communication skills. There are 4 basic communication skills: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So he was more focusing on listening. And the few lucky ones who got his blessings for a very long time, still I'm wherever he is. I still remember, during our discussion, he was always concerned about growth and development of higher education, growth specifically teacher education in India. He used to discuss issues related to interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, or transdisciplinarity, flexibility, and choices of subjects, multiple entry and exit points, integration of technology into teaching and learning, and also an evaluation process. That vision, have been largely incorporated into the new education policy 2021, where all these, features have already been there in the new education policy 2021. Professor Passi's futuristic vision of vision society for world peace and happiness through innovations are much sought insight in the present times. Professor Passi was always concerned about the problems of the present and the future of the human society. He would always ask me what is happening now, what are the biggest challenges, what are the choices available, what should we care about, and what should we teach to our children. So, we often met and kept on discussing it. To address various issues, Professor Pasi vision about the intellectual forum like GERA, a discussion board where people can ask questions, share their experiences, and discuss topics of mutual interest. It is an excellent way to create social connections and a sense of community. As the theme of the conference is about re-engineering, it's about re-engineering responsible innovation in education, leading to a sustainable society. Friends, nowadays sustainability is crossing the boundaries in all areas of society. With 5 basic elements, that is called food, energy, water, waste, and ecology, organizations around the world are taking major steps in creating a society that functions and prospers with sustainability. The Pasi was always, in favor of sustainable development of the society. At the heart of UNESCO 2030 agenda, are 5 critical dimensions. They call it 5 P's. What are these critical dimensions? People, prosperity, planet, partnership, and peace. These are 5 P's, which is in UNESCO agenda for 2030 for sustainable development. How Pasi will always discuss with us that how can we care at all kinds of life forms. How could we minimize the depletion of natural resources? How could we enable the communities to care for their own environment? Most importantly, how to improve the quality of human life. That was his concern, the improvement of quality of human life. We always had a discussion that how do you define quality. Whereas responsible innovation, is an emerging concept that aims to prevent or deal with the problems that arise with their innovation. This is done by, taking social and ethical aspects into account and by balancing economic, social, cultural, and environmental aspects also. The public expects us to act responsibly. And responsible innovation creates space and process to explore innovation, and its consequences is an open, inclusive, and timely way. It goes beyond considerations of ethics, public engagement, risk, and regulations. To decide what responsible innovation means, it is necessary to understand the ethical significance of innovation as a kind of action that can significantly alter the natural and social world of human condition. It is often assumed that such changes are introduced responsibly only if we act with foresight. Friends, I was listening to the previous keynote address where virtual classrooms and future classrooms and the use of artificial intelligence and chatbots and everything like this. In the world of scientific and technological breakthroughs, development and innovations seems to occur on almost daily basis. Responsible innovation provides a framework for educators to discuss how or why technological innovations might be controversial or worthy for a debate. I will be discussing about 2 concerns which Professor Pasi had about technology and I'll be sharing with you. Information technology the need of the hour, no. So the world is changing very fast. Technology significantly, specifically information technology has transformed our life. Even our classrooms, our pedagogies, our education system, I mean, it has transformed our lives. It has touched every aspect of our life. The world has become a global village. We are connected to each other. Really? Are we connected to each other? Right? This brings the conflict between real and virtual connectivity. Pasi was always in favor of real connectivity than virtual connectivity. Friends, look at the human evolution and we find that we started with no connectivity. Then we developed connectivity with the close ones, those who are around us. And now it's a virtual connectivity or cyber connectivity which has led to the global village and global economy and globalization. Here we have to take responsibility. And on one hand, on one side, we are connected globally. On the other side, while we are constructing fences and walls on our national borders, right? It's happening around the world. We are saying that we are connected globally, but we are creating walls and borders and fences. See, friends, you can unfriend or block some friend on a virtual platform. It is happening. And if you don't like, you can unfriend or block on a virtual platform. But what will happen to the next door neighbor who is physically staying with you? You can't unfriend or block that neighbor. You have to see every day. Then what is our practice? We try to create a wall, or we try to erect a wall that I don't want to see that. And I don't want to see you. That's our wall. But, I mean, does that wall really work? We are nowadays, we are more connected to screen than our senses. Right? It seems that we are not even connected to our senses. We have 5 senses that we all know. But what we can see today is only eyes, ears, and 3 fingers. Is what I used to discuss with Pasi. So there is a fear, friends, here. We have to think very seriously that we are losing connection with our own body. Right? Friends, I learned from Professor Pasi that the human feelings are the ultimate source of the thought. Let us re-engineer that human feeling. Right? So, the post-globalization world, Lego, many do not feel it. The truth is, we have never had such a great opportunity to build a large community and increase our chances of solving global challenges and problems. It's a great opportunity, but with a caution. Internet and social networks can facilitate this process. But the truth is that more connectivity brings more conflicts. It is happening now. We are facing a completely disillusioned and a fearful society. Seeing social networks completely transform the spread of all kinds of speeches, or hate speech against. Alliance between media and governance is quite evident, and it is dangerous also. There is a caution. And therefore, what we need that our people should be, literate. Information literacy and media literacy becomes the need of the hour. Right? It is always said in life. But what is happening now is, ironically, that technology is knowing more about an individual than that particular individual by using artificial intelligence. In the present technological scenario, massive amount of data are now stored and processed from months to minutes. We constantly find ourselves in the middle of data loop, whereby large amount of data about us are collected and analyzed. And the results of that analysis are then used to shape digital environment, even product offerings, and so on. Meanwhile, our reactions to such customizations are themselves turned into even more data that is collected and further analyzed, and so on. Certainly, this has all sorts of implications for privacy, freedom to choose, the ability of institutions to regulate, and many other domains. An issue that has thus far attracted less attention than its merit is the extent to which such datafication practices end up similar to conditioning human behavior. Almost knowingly or unknowingly, our behavior is being shaped by remote person or remote agency. In recent years, artificial intelligence has been able to stimulate reasoning and learn much faster than humans. Artificial intelligence is, manipulating our human desires. It's a question, right? It is also predicting, human choices. There's a fear that we might become a hackable animal. Could be hacked. In other words, process of re-engineering humans has already started. For example, there are elections in 5 states in India. For example, the biggest discovery which we made in the 20th century, that was democracy. In democracy, a voter becomes the highest political authority. But since there is a chance that it could be humans could be hacked, and there is a fear that democracy will be taken over by digital dictatorship in 21st century. Friends, data colonies are built around the world. Really, our privacy and our choices and our behavior, is in danger. Right? As the last speaker was, discussing about the skills. So no one knows that what job market will look like in down the line in 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years. We do not even have a guess about which functions will still exist and which one will already be completely replaced by the technology. In the face of such world, the big question is, how do we raise our children if we do not know that what will be the world look like in coming 20, 30 or 50 years from now? Today, we know more or less the kinds of skills we need to have to get a job and prosper. But which ones will our children need to thrive to? In the face of an increasing technology-driven world, in national education policy, we are focusing more on skill development. Friends, earlier, a person used to learn one skill and that skill, was sufficient for his lifetime. Typist if you learn typing, the typist would work in an office for 30 years typing. But nowadays, as your last speaker said, that the skill set changing, very fast. The skill set will be changing almost in 2 to 3 years. So the younger generation has to learn and keep on learning, every 2 to 3 years new skills to survive. It's a challenge for the educational institutions also, because we are offering 1 year, 2 year, 3 year programs, and if we have designed a program for a particular skill set, and after completion of 3 years, a student is coming out and that skill set is out of the market. So we have to also think about that. As we know that AI and automation will bring unemployment. Dealing with large number of unemployment will be an issue in the future. So, responsible, we should think that what should be the level of automation. Automation versus unemployment debate is already on. People are discussing about this. Friends, in the era of globalism, we call it a globalism. In the era of globalism, nationalism or patriotism is also quite evident. Patriotism itself is not a problem. But when it turns into, this is what we used to discuss the process. But when it turns into, and that I'm proud of my country because it is supreme and must crush everyone else. Right? This is the problem. The way of thinking is a problem. This kind of thinking, leads to war. Right? So, this is also, therefore I said that information literacy and media literacy is a must in present times. Hence, although new technology promises a lot of positive things, but the threat and danger of technology will also have significant impact. Human civilizations have re-engineered humanity for millennia. Humanity, is who we are and are capable of being within our built world. It's reflected in the world that we are doing for ourselves, our children and future generations. Technology re-engineers humanity in part of affecting human capability and in part of shaping and constituting our values, beliefs, and shared commitments. Though the challenges are unprecedented, and though the disagreements are intense, humankind can rise to the occasion if we keep our fears under control and be a bit more humble about our views. Kind words, as Mother Teresa said, kind words can be short and easy to speak, but their echoes are truly endless. Lately, Professor Pasi was focusing more on dialogue methods of teaching and learning. I hope his vision for higher education, teacher education, and dialogue approach would be fulfilled soon. I sincerely thank Professor S.T. Malhotra sir, Dr. Mrs. Subhashini Pasi, and United Group of Institutions, and GERA for inviting me to deliver Pasi Memorial Lecture in this conference. Thanks. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, Professor Akhilesh Kumar Singh. Really overwhelmed by your ideas. You have wonderfully said one thing, that there is an irony. On one side we are saying that there is a global village. Yes, there is a global village. The whole world in a global village. On the other side, you have wonderfully said that they see the irony we are losing connection between our body parts also. Wonderfully said. And person doesn't know who is living in the neighborhood and all these things. And you again pointed out one thing, that privacy is being questioned now because of the digital polarization. And artificial intelligence is having a reasoning, manipulation and all this. And really there is a need to re-engineer human beings. You have given a very good, I should say, message. Thank you very much for that. And thanks a lot for the past memorial lecture. I will also like to place thanks to Professor J.K. Dino also, who gave us the idea of innovative pedagogy rather than administrative pedagogy of administrative experience. Same in the same tone, I would like to thank Professor Mandula also, who said that there is something about the psychological implications of this remote type of learning, and there has to be readiness to accept the ICT changes. Thank you very much, Professor Mandula. Thank you very much, Professor J.K. Bruno. And thanks a lot, Professor Aflain Singh, for giving us the messages. Thanks a lot. We learned a lot.
Thank you for providing me the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor S. Malhotra, for the vote of thanks. Thank you so much, Professor S. Malhotra, for the vote of thanks. Next, we will be having a technical session, and I request all the delegates to join their respective technical session for the paper presentation. Thank you.
अब आर्ट स्टेशन पैडल स्टार्ट होने वाला है। मैं सोच रही हूँ मैं इसको कैसे लूँ।
अब तो वो लिंक चलेगी।
वो बटन में डिस्ट्रीब्यूट तो सबको नहीं करना है।
कौन से?
ये तो हमारा फिर कॉन्फ्रेंस करना तो
अब ये तो बहुत शुरू होगा ना।
ये कल शुरू होगा। इसको वाइंड अप करते सारे
ऐसे करो कि